Hello, everybody. My name's Jim, and this is my reading wrap up for May 2023. I read 6 books this month. I finished Tanya Tania, and then I read 5 more. And I checked my stats, and I hit over 1,000 pages, which is something that I've never done. The reason that I started this channel was because I was not an avid reader before, and then I wanted to create this channel so that I could be, but I didn't think that I would hit that 1,000-page mark. So that's pretty cool and exciting. And this month I have a full, well-rounded star count, I guess, of the books that I read, and I'm gonna go in rating order. So I'm going to start with my 1-star read, which if you have been keeping up to date with my videos, you already know which one that is. And then I have 2 5-star reads that I'm going to talk about as well, and then everything in between. My 1-star read for this month was Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough. No surprise, I put up a rant review for this. So this is part of my self-imposed media mirror challenge. This is the story of a single mom secretary who kisses a man randomly at a bar and immediately is enamored and obsessed with him and decides that she is going to ruin his life. No, it's not really like that. But the foundation of this book was so shaky. Everything that happened subsequently after it ended up falling apart. And it kind of ruined and overshadowed the overarching premise of this novel, which I thought was pretty cool. It talked about lucid dreaming and astral projection and things that I wasn't familiar about, but thought it was so cool reading it. But it was ruined by this forced love triangle. It was really just bad. If Sarah Pinborough would have taken out the love triangle, or at least made it a bit more organic, possibly had Louise find out David was her boss and then work through that awkwardness without, Louise being so obsessed and trying to interject herself into his life and his wife's life, that would have been great. Or better yet, let David and Adele switch places. Let Louise be Adele's secretary and have this story kind of play out the same way. It was just so shaky, and it could have been fixed so easily if the beginning of the story just didn't happen the way it did. It wasn't an exciting read. I honestly should have DNF'd it, but I didn't. Because, everybody's talking about the ending, and the blurb even says, why is everyone talking about the ending of Sarah Pinborough's Behind Her Eyes? And why indeed? This is a mystery novel, but the biggest mystery is why Louise is so infatuated by this man who at no point in the story does anything romantic or cute or charming. It blows my mind. And this has a Netflix series. So, Sarah Pinborough is making bank off this. She's making a ton of money. So, good for her. I have nothing against Sarah Pinborough herself. Even with this book, she had a great premise. I just don't think it was solid enough. I think it melted like a leaky ice cream cone. It just kind of right there. It's not a book that I would necessarily recommend unless you enjoy love triangles. Not my favorite read. Again, I should have DNF'd it, but I didn't, and so it received a 1-star rating. The next book is my 2-star. Tanya Tania was a book that crossed over from last month into this month, and I hadn't quite reached the halfway point. Tanya Talati is the Tanya with a Y, and Tanya Ghosh is the Tanya with an I, and from now on, I'm just going to use their last names to keep things a little bit simpler. But there was a mystery, and the real reason why I wanted to keep reading was because I wanted to find out why Ghosh had stopped responding to Talati. This is an epistolary novel where 2 teenage girls were encouraged by their mothers to start writing each other. Their mothers were friends in college, so they figured, hey, why don't we force our daughters to be friends too? Talati lives in Karachi, Pakistan, and Ghosh lives in Bombay, India. This is around the early 90s, so of course there is some language that's used that would not be cool today, but that's just a little warning. It's not too frequent, but it is something that I wanted to bring up. It's not acceptable to use today. I understand why she used it, though, to match the time period of the early 90s. These two girls, I had a hard time liking them because they were very shallow. They were the very stereotypical teenage girl type, especially Gauche, who was very into her appearance. It was almost as if she valued her looks as part of her personality, while Talati was not as wealthy. She valued her education and talked about that a lot. So this epistolary novel kind of just goes through there every day. There were some parts throughout the novel that also kept my interest, where it caused my historical fiction senses to start tingling a little bit, but things really didn't start to hit the fan until way later in the book. And there was one chapter that was much longer and contained all of this information at once, and I wish that it would have been spread out a little bit. I wish that Antara Ganguly, the author, I didn't even say that in the beginning, but I wish that Antara Ganguly would have started a little bit later so that we could have gotten to that point, or at least dropped in more nuggets about what's going on in their world sooner. There were nuggets here and there, but it was overshadowed by their mundane, everyday lives. With the letters going back and forth, they seemed to be very disconnected. The girls, in a very shallow way, responded to each other. They didn't really have a conversation, and there was a time in the novel where they switched from letters to a phone conversation, and I wish I could have heard those phone conversations, because there were some points where they referenced them in their letters, but I feel like it would have been more impactful had I heard them actually say the words than writing back and forth. And all of the letters were dated, as in they had a timestamp at the top. And some of the dates didn't make sense. Like, I remember there was one time where Gauche sent Talati 2 letters in the same day, and she was wondering why Talati hadn't responded to the first letter that she sent in that same day. I have never known of a postal service to work that fast, especially across countries, so it didn't really make sense at that point. If you're going to date your letters, make sure that it's accurate. And there were some times too where one of the girls would write the other one and just be like, did you not even read my last letter? And then that was all that she put. Even if the other girl, spilled her heart out and didn't necessarily respond, like, at least acknowledge some of it. It just seemed very disconnected. It didn't seem very conversational in a lot of parts, and that bugged me. And then finally, the ending was infuriating. This book encouraged me to create a characters that I absolutely hate list. I might do that at the end of the year because I don't have very many right now. I am going to create that. Hopefully at the end of this year, if I can build up a collection of characters that I do not like. I know that this was Antara Ganguly's debut. I think that her authorial voice is strong, but this book just, it didn't do it for me. It didn't do it. Even last month, I said that it was kind of teetering on 2 to 3 stars. It started to work its way up when I thought that it was going to start diving into more of the historical fiction elements. But when certain things started happening in one city that the girl in the other city really should have reacted to, and she didn't, it really dulled that for me. This was a period in which these things that were going on in both countries were so important and so impactful. There was no real build-up, and that made the latter chapters so sudden, which I wasn't too bothered by, but there was so much of it being overtaken by just regular mundane things, and I didn't really get a feel for what was going on until the crap hit the fan later in the book. So it just wasn't the best read for me. I talked about that book for quite a while. Sorry about that. But the next book on the list is Whatever Remains of Us in the End. This is by Brandon Baker. This is an indie author, I believe. I think that he published independently. I'm not completely sure. But this book reminded me very much of Quentin Tarantino movies. Just in the way that it was presented and in the way that it felt like a revenge book. It's a novella, so it's a short one. But yeah, so just a very brief summary. This is a story about a guy named Lee. He is gay, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to pick this story up, because I wanted a gay hero. He and his best bud, Ethan, they get together. I think they live together. They're just trying to make it in the world. Lee lost his parents, and Ethan's really the only person that he has left in his life, who is his best friend. They get caught up in this heist situation where a person that Lee knows, I'm not sure if Ethan does, I have to go back and check, but I know that Lee knows this guy. He passed away, and there's a heist situation in the works to try to rob this house where the wake is being held. And so Lee gets caught up in this really terrible situation. I'm just going to tell you now, it's with neo-Nazis. He ends up having to work for them. Kind of going back to Shaky Foundations, was that this book had the most obvious first villain that you could probably think of. He was a buddy of Ethan's when they were in prison together, and Ethan was like, "Oh yeah, this guy is cool. He's fine. He's harmless. He da 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 da." But he was this really, literally, it was painted on his face, literally, that he was not somebody to mess with. And Shaky Foundation, I would not trust this guy. I would completely question my friendship with somebody. I don't care if I consider them brother, sister, bestie, don't care. If they got along with this person who so obviously had hate symbols tattooed on his face, I would not. I would question that friendship. I would leave that friendship. There was a lot of exposition about Lee's background and Ethan's background, which I think could have been cut or not cut, but brought up in a more organic way. For instance, one of the things that I brought up in my Goodreads review was that Ethan had a limp. We didn't need the backstory to go over his injury that caused his limp. We could have seen him walking in the story and seeing him limping, and then there could have been an introduction that way. Same with Lee losing his family. There could have been a bit more of an organic introduction to that as well, because it is mentioned throughout the novella. Pieces of that could have been put together without having to give us so much exposition early on in the beginning. I really like when things unfold naturally, and there were a few instances where there were fades to black that I thought were a bit convenient. I wish that Lee would have done a bit more exploring once he reached the house and kind of uncovered things a little bit more before the climax. I just wish that there was a little bit more in between, because Brandon Baker, like his exposition was well done. His descriptions of the setting are well done, and these are things that I think that he could have incorporated, because he's just so naturally good at providing visuals, especially when things are nasty. Good gosh. But he's so good at providing visuals that I think he could have filled those gaps. This was an exciting read, actually, just to see a new author who was just naturally talented produce a book that, I mean, the premise, I enjoyed it. It just needed a little bit more tightening up, and that's why I gave it 3 stars. But I think that if he continues to write horror, especially this gory, sort of visceral, nasty, gross horror, I think he's gonna go far. And yeah, I hope he doesn't lose that Quentin Tarantino-esque sort of revenge sort of thing, because I enjoyed it. I enjoy a Quentin Tarantino movie, So yeah, it's 3 stars, but I can see him producing more books in the future that, just keep improving and improving and improving. The Love Bug was written by the Disney Corporation. I'm sure there was a human name behind that, but I'm not sure who that was. Maybe it's in the book, but I don't have it right now in my hands to look at it. But The Love Bug is about Herbie, and this is one of the reasons why I reviewed Christine earlier this month, is because I wanted to talk about this. I watched This Car Herbie, just like I watched Christine growing up. Two completely different genres, two completely different types of movies. But Herbie was so cute. And when I read Christine, I wanted to read a Herbie book so bad. He was just the most adorable little bug. I fell in love with him. He it was just so cute with his little meet meet, his little beeps, and it was just a cute story. It was a cute movie. If you don't know about Herbie, just look the movie up. I may be telling you to watch a movie that's terrible. I might be talking about this with nostalgia glasses, but I remember enjoying the movie very much. I particularly remember Buddy Hackett as Tennessee. I thought he was so animated and so funny in the movie. But anyway, so about the book. The book is pretty much the same. It's funny, it's cute, it's charming. But goodness, there are some things that Mr. Thorndike could get away with in this book that, like, it's attempted murder. It's not good at all. And this is a children's book. He ran Herbie off the road and into a tree. That's not just him, being this funny dastardly villain. This is him trying to kill some people and also, total a car in the process. But man, so this story is about this man named Jim. He wants to purchase a car. I can't remember specifically if he wants to be a racer, like a race car driver, but he needs to have a car. He goes to the car dealer, and this little Beetle is the only one that he can afford. So he gets the Beetle, he soups it up and names it Herbie, and then finds out that Herbie has a mind of his own and he would love to join and dominate these little races that they take part in. I guess they're local. But there's a cash prize at the end of all of them, and because Jim isn't well endowed in the money department, he thinks that this is a good way for him to make money because Herbie is just so miraculously good at being a racing car. And so Mr. Thorndike is also part of these races, and he does whatever he can to foil Jim's plans at winning. And so he comes up with these different plans, Mr. Thorndike, to ruin Jim's chances at placing in any of these events. He wants to destroy Herbie. He does whatever he can. And so this story is about Jim, Tennessee, and then a mechanic named Carol working together to make sure that Herbie stays in tip-top shape and can continue to win these races because Herbie himself loves doing it, and he's a cute little car, and it's just a cute little book, and I really enjoyed reading it. I was so happy to get around to it. I did give it 4 stars just because it's strange for a kid's book to have attempted murder in it. It's just weird to me, but it is cute. It does feel a little bit older, like it does feel like it should go to an older audience. So I'm not really sure where I would necessarily sell this book, who I would sell it to. But yeah, it is a cute one, and I'm so happy that I was able to get around to it and review this book with Christine, the 2 sentient cars. I wanted to keep them within the same month. So, yeah, but Herbie's super cute. If you want to check it out, do it. This book seems to be pretty rare, though, so it might be kind of hard to find. If you do want to read it and you do happen to find it, then give it a read. I had a good time. So Lift by Kelly Corrigan is another one of my Media Mirror Challenge books. I was happy to have read it because, like I said, when I reviewed Behind Her Eyes, I was a little bit worried that this challenge would go down the tube. But this was a very good book. This is about a set of moms, 3 moms, just doing their best. This book is a letter to Kelly Corrigan's daughters, Georgia and Claire. And I said that in my review for Lift. It is a bit anecdotal, but at the same time, there are 3 main feature stories that cover these 3 moms and these intense situations. Hospitals are involved. I think in all 3, actually. But it's a tearjerker. It is it is something that grips your heart and it doesn't let you go. And these are, again, high stress stories, especially for a parent to have to deal with and have to face. But parents do deal with this. And while I'm not a parent, I hear these stories all the time where mothers and fathers are questioning, am I doing the right thing? Am I making the best decisions? Am I a good role model? Am I doing well by my child or my children? These stresses aren't often written about in books. These very detailed struggles that parents have just to be parents, these internal struggles, these self-doubts. And I think that that is covered in a way in this memoir, this memoir, I guess you could say. It's a very good read. And at first I thought that it was going to be a bit too anecdotal. I thought that this was going to be something that, I wasn't going to understand, but Claire and Georgia would understand, once they're older, which they are now. But it was something that I think would be great for any mother to read, any parent to read. That's why I did a review for it for Mother's Day in America, just to put it out there that this is a good book for you. But also, as far as what I didn't say in that review, I do hope that Kelly Corrigan was able to write more for her daughters. I hope that, now that they're older, I hope that it didn't stop at this book. I hope that she continued to jot these things down as her children grew, because when she published this book, they were still small. And she even mentioned it in the memoir, where she said, you're asleep right now. She would say these things that were happening in the moment as she was writing, which was also very sweet and very tender, and I just got chills thinking about it. They could look at this and just have this book to help them prepare for life and for some of the other challenges that they may face moving forward. It's good to have a little bit of a handbook, a little bit of a guide to look at, and to show that there are people out there who are just like you, who empathize with you and understand everything that you're going through. So this is great for parents. This is great for her daughters, who she wrote this for. I know that there were a lot of comments and reviews about whether or not that this should have been just kept in a shoebox for them to read later. And while I understand that, it is a pretty beneficial thing, I think, for mothers to read if they just need a little bit of understanding, a little bit of grace, from another mother. This book was over before I even realized that it was. So yeah, it was a good read, and I'm happy to have shared it with you guys. So the last book, and this is another 5-star read. This video is going really long, and I'm so sorry, but there's a lot to say about all of these books. Going Under by Sonia Henry was a huge surprise. This was her debut novel as well. There were some parts in this book where I could very clearly tell that this was her first. There was a page where she let out a breath she didn't know she was holding, and that kind of snapped me out of the trance a little bit. There were some pages also where she included some very run-of-the-mill dialogue that I don't think that we necessarily needed. There were also a couple of chapters that I think she could have taken out, as well as a character. But overall, the medical commentary was excellent, and I don't think that we could have gotten this from someone who was not a doctor herself. Sonia Henry, the author, is a doctor, and she wrote this. This was a quasi-memoir. It felt like a memoir. It was definitely a self-insert, because there was also a time, another cliche, where the main character Kitty looked at herself in the mirror, described her appearance, and I'm like, that's you, Sonia. You're not fooling anybody. So yeah, it was a quasi-memoir. I know that a lot of this was embellished, but this really goes over the challenges and the struggles of a new doctor entering the field for the first time after medical school, and the power dynamics that they go through, and just the high pressure, high stress situation of having to juggle everything in the hospital while trying to stick a needle in a patient. Just the amount of calm you have to force. And there was actually a part in this novel where she says that being a good doctor sometimes involves being a good actor. You just have to force this calm while you are working with your patients. Things are happening around you. You lose people, and the power dynamics of people trying to step on you to get to the top. It's just a lot of pressure. And as somebody who works in the corporate world, while I don't have to deal with patients or customers directly, I do understand some of those power dynamics where people are always trying to bring you down. They're always trying to climb socially, and those people bug me to no end. I know exactly who they are. But yeah, it's something that in the working world you do have to face a lot of the time, and I think that that was covered very well in this book. The sexy moments that were promised were not so great, and it kind of made me wonder, because this was on the cusp of 4-star. Like, this was kind of teetering on the line of a 4-star read and a 5-star read, and it made me wonder, like, are the parts that she embellished as strong as the parts that I felt were life experiences, things that I know that she knew? I would be interested to see her continue to write fiction just to get a more accurate feel of her style. Does she know what she knows, or, is she creative enough to really branch out and do a little bit more? So I would be interested to read another book by her that was a little bit less memoir focused and a bit more fictional. Because again, I think she is a very strong writer. I thought that the medical conversation was excellent. I think she covered that very well. There was a lot of booze, a lot of drugs, and there was a, quote, gay best friend in this novel, but it wasn't the stereotypical gay best friend, which I really appreciated. He had an actual personality. He was actually well-rounded, and I loved him. He was great. So yeah, there were so many things that she did well. She was a little bit too obsessed over somebody, but even that felt organic and realistic. I wasn't too bothered by it. But yeah, this was a surprise for me, and this was one that I was worried was going to go downhill really fast, but it never did. And I love the characters. I love the medical part. I never want to say never, but I'm convinced that this was a book that would not have been on my radar at all ever. I got this used from a library all the way in Australia, so it flew a very long way, and I am so glad that it was worth it. I enjoyed it. I recommend it. I hope that you guys enjoy it as much as I did. Just, do what I did and overlook the parts where it's very obvious that this was her debut. There are some lines that are forgivable, for me at least, when somebody is writing for the first time versus when they are seasoned. So I do give a little bit of liberty and leniency there. But overall, I do think that this was a great book. This was a good month. I'm so excited to have surpassed 1,000 pages, which I never thought that I would do, especially as somebody who is reading again. So that was a surprise, and I haven't really started any other novels. I've cracked open Siren Queen, but I haven't gotten far enough in to really talk about it for this wrap up. So I guess that's it. If you want to purchase any of these books, the links to their Goodreads pages are in the description below. Click on that. If you like the blurb, go over to the left side, I think, and click on the retailer of your choice. Purchase it from there, or use Libby, or go to your library to check out the book for yourself. Otherwise, I've been Jim. You've been great. Happy reading.